First observation I want to make, first point of context I want to make by way of amplifying some of what we said, is that this is an old story. Those of you who might know Francis Fitzgerald's still compelling book, 1979, America Revised, which is a history of the way high school, mostly grade school, high school American history textbooks were written and rewritten from the late 19th century through the post-World War II era. You'll know just how deeply ingrained this story is in our national past. Every generation essentially has rewritten the story of American history. And the ground on which teachers of American history, as all of us stand, has always been contested terrain. So we really shouldn't be at all surprised that we stand on contested ground. And in some ways I think we should take comfort in the fact that this is a good thing. It means that history is understood to be a living subject. It's not just an inert body of facts that people ingest at a certain age, and that's what they do for the rest of their life. Indeed, continuing the learned contestation of American history is what keeps us all in business. If it weren't for that, we'd all just have to shut up shop. In my own case, I have a personal relationship to this, as Paul Ware just mentioned, because in the 1970s I inherited, as it were, a textbook that was already, at that time, some 20 years old. The principal original author was Thomas A. Bailey. It's called The American Pageant, as Paul said. We're now actually publishing our 15th edition, and over the years I've acquired co-authors with Poe and Harvard. And I make a lot of presentations in high schools around California and elsewhere, in fact, where this book is used. And I'm taking with me a copy of a textbook written by David Saville Muzzy, published in 1911, first edition, which was for 2 or 3 generations the primary text used in the teaching of American history throughout this country. And I happen to own a copy of David Saville Muzzy's text, on the inside cover of which is written, sold to Thomas A. Bailey, San Jose, California, 1916, when he was in high school. That's the way he learned his history. And I read passages from this book and then read passages from The American Pageant by way of illustrating how historical interpretation changes sometimes drastically over time. My favorite example, pair from these 2 books, is The History of Reconstruction, which anybody familiar with that, the evolution of that debate will know what I'm referring to. So this is an old story, the contestation of how we remember our national past. It turns out this story has a particularly deep root in the South. Here I'm drawing on some research done by a Stanford undergraduate and a terrific senior honors essay submitted this last year, named Amelia Schneider, in which she informs us that in the 1890s there were 2 organizations throughout the South, the United Daughters of the Confederacy and United Confederate Veterans, who joined hands to lobby their state school boards, local school boards, and so on, to make sure that the Civil War era was taught in a proper fashion. That's why in Southern history textbooks in particular, well into the 20th century, late 20th century, the chapters dealing with that episode often have titles like The War for Southern Independence, or in more egregious cases, The War of Northern Aggression. These same bodies, the United Daughters of the Confederacy, United Confederate Veterans, this is 100+ years ago now, also lobbied strenuously, I'm quoting now, to discourage discussion of Jim Crow, lynching, segregated schools, and race-based restrictions on voting in our schools, because this would leave students with a negative impression of their country. So we recognize this as the language of our time. Now, in the 1990s, a century later, here in Texas, thanks to something called Proclamation 67, issued by the Texas State School Board in 1990, an outfit arose called Educational Research Analysts, headed by a couple, Diane Mel and Norman Gadler, who set themselves up as the authors of an ongoing syllabus of errors in textbooks used in this state. They identified thousands of alleged errors, factual, interpretive, or otherwise. Some of this was actually not altogether hooey. One of the errors they found in the textbook that they reviewed was a chapter on the Korean War, in which it was asserted with confidence that the Korean War had been easily settled with the dropping of a single atomic bomb. So this is an ongoing effort, and I suppose it's not altogether irrelevant that the citizen watchdogs are paying attention some people would argue we have rewritten so many different stories that we've lost a master narrative of our national past. And in that circumstance, we should not be surprised that people argue with us and argue back at us about the way we have deconstructed the master narrative. And it begins here just to signal where I'm headed with this. I raised the question of how well we've done as teachers of American history by reporting to you that in 2007, a national poll reported that 65% of the polled fellow citizens agreed with the proposition that the founders intended to create a Christian nation, and 55% agreed with the proposition that the Constitution made that so. Okay, that's my first step. Second is to repeat that I think this kind of argumentation is good. It is a reminder to us that history matters. It lives in the hearts and souls of the people we deal with, as it does in our own professional life. People care about this subject. It's not irrelevant. And that at least gives us some purchase for communicating more effectively. The final point I want to make is simply this. That maybe the ways that we do history as professional historians don't matter as much as we might like or as we imagine. And my favorite example of this, I also give a lot of lectures from different places about World War II. I've now fallen in the habit of wagering with my sponsor, whoever it might be, that no further on than the third question in the field that you were in, someone will ask about the conspiracy theory of Pearl Harbor. Now, if there ever was a fact that has been disproved and got so respectful to this group of people, then that's it. And professional students of the matter, but that idea will not go away. There are lots of other examples that we could cite. So history, for better or worse, I think probably mostly for worse, but not altogether for worse, is absorbed from 1,000 different sources, not just from the way we write it and teach it. And I think we maybe possibly share a delusion with the other side of this matter. It's a delusion that was encapsulated best for me in a comment by Ralph Reed, the head of the Christian Coalition, when he said, "I would rather have 1,000 school board members than one president of the United States and no school board members." Ralph Reed puts a lot of faith in the effectiveness of classroom teaching as a way of properly instructing our students. So I think maybe we and the other side of this contest maybe overestimate the power of teaching and textbook writing as a way of communicating effectively about history. And maybe our side would be better off directing attention to our lasts and maybe inventing some new lasts. And we might, if we look deeply at the matter into our own hearts, ask why does it say our effectiveness as educators that these clearly